Today's webinar is titled An Introvert's Journey to Leadership. Our presenter today is alumnus Ben Woelk, Program Manager for the Information Security Office at RIT, where he's developed a leading information security awareness program. Ben is a member and former co-chair of the EDUCAUSE Internet 2 Security Awareness and Training Workgroup of the Higher Education Information Security Council. He is also a former director and community chair for the Society of Technical Communication and is the current scholarship committee chair. Ben is a certified information systems security professional, a certified professional technical communicator, and accredited trainer, and is an ITIL version 3 certified. Ben holds degrees from the University of Florida, Trinity International University, and the University of Rochester, and an advanced certificate in technical information design from RIT. Ben is adjunct faculty at RIT as well, teaching classroom and online courses in computing security fundamentals and technical communication. Prior to joining RIT, Ben provided technical communications and change management consulting to a number of area Fortune 500 companies. His current interests include working with other security awareness practitioners to develop effective security awareness programs and providing mentoring and coaching to new and aspiring introverted leaders, and speaking and presenting workshops on introverted leadership, creating security awareness programs, and technical communication. Ben, we're thrilled to have you with us. Let's get going.
Okay, thanks, Cindy, for the introduction. My apologies for such a daunting bio to read, especially with all the acronyms in it, but that's one of the dangers of being in information security. But we're not going to talk about security today. What we are going to talk about is introversion, introverted leadership, and specifically about my personal journey to introverted leadership. It's interesting. I've found this presentation challenging to do in the past because it's very easy as an introvert to talk deeply about a subject you know a lot about. It's very difficult to talk about yourself. So that's something I've had to learn to do as part of this presentation. So this is a picture of me doing karaoke at an international conference with somebody who is very much an extrovert. But despite that fact, yes, I really am an introvert. What I've found is that as I've learned about introversion and about the strengths and gifts of honestly of being an introvert, that has informed my approach to leadership and helped me understand that, yes, I can even be a leader, which is something I questioned many times early in my career. And I really believe that this self-understanding and leveraging these skills and learning where my strengths and my weaknesses are has made me a better leader. So I think we have a poll question now. So the initial poll question is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And we're going to ask this now, and we're going to ask it in a few minutes as we get farther into the presentation, just to see if things have shifted a bit. And if you're not sure, you still have this. Yeah, I see it up there. So you can choose not sure as an option if you're not sure either way. Now, what's interesting is the groups that I normally associate with, which are technical communicators and information security people, those are pretty much a lot of introverted people. So we usually see a much larger attendance on the introversion side than the extrovert side. I'll refrain from comments on that.
Looks like the results are coming up shortly, Ben.
Okay. So what we're seeing is that the introverts were very excited to turn into this presentation, but we have a couple of extroverts, or maybe quite a few people who may not be sure either way. And here are our results.
There we go. You got some introverts on the webinar.
So thank you all for joining. So key points. What I'm going to talk about in the presentation, I'll talk about what is an introvert. Obviously, in doing that, what distinguishes an introvert from an extrovert. More importantly, for the purposes of this presentation, how introvert strengths actually apply to leadership, and my personal part, how I made it work for me. And then we'll talk about strategies and things that you all could do in terms of discovering your hidden abilities. We'll call it, that sounds much more esoteric than it is, but your introvert strengths and what strategies you can use to develop those as well. So I've got a set of pictures up here around extroverts, and these are all kind of designed to give us a feel for what life is like as an extrovert. And granted, some of the pictures can be taken either way. I know several introverts who actually skydive. But for extroverts, most of the interest is really around the outer world of people and things, not so much the inner thought life, which we'll talk about when we talk about introverts. Extroverts tend to be very active. They tend to have a breadth of interest in many different areas. They don't necessarily tend to dive deep into anything, which, again, I'm speaking in generalities, so there'll always be an exception. They like to live life and then understand it. Now, it's interesting because my family, spouse, 2 kids, everybody besides me is an extrovert. So for them, it's very much let's get out and go, go, go. And for me, I'd just as soon sit at home and not have to go back out after being at work. But my son is what Myers-Briggs, which we aren't going to go into in any kind of depth at all. He comes as a champion in Myers-Briggs. And as an extrovert, as a champion, for him, he has to very much experience things to understand them. I mean, I think it's kind of a truism that we hear as parents that we really can't seem to tell our kids things. A lot of the time they have to experience it. For him, that's very much the case, and everything has to kind of be full bore as he jumps into things. If there's a mountain, he has to climb it. If there's a pier, he has to go to the end of it, or the trip is just not complete. But for him, this actually experiencing things and then understanding them is how he functions. They sometimes seem to be reward seekers and fame, and they may pursue fame. Now, this may or may not be the case all the time, but in terms of reward seekers, even in terms of gambling, this idea that, I can win big, and I want that kind of experience. Many introverts tend to be more conservative than that. And they also re-energize by solar panels. And what this means, and this is really going to be one of the key differentiators, is to re-energize by solar panel, it means for an extrovert, they get their energy from being around people and drawing from groups of people. So if you go to a party and they're extroverts, there will be extroverts at the party or there wouldn't even be a party. But the extroverts will tend to be clustered in the center of the room. It's where the loud, active conversation is going, and that's where you would see them. And after the party, unless it's really, really long, they come back more energized than they were before they went to it. Now, for introverts, it's a little bit different. Introverts are much more focused on their inner world of ideas and impressions. One of the things that took a while for me to learn as I was married was that when my spouse was talking to me and wanting reflections on things, she really wanted me to respond out loud. And I would sit there and I have all these thoughts in my head, but they would stay within my head. So I would really be quite active thinking about things, but from somebody outside, they frankly necessarily couldn't even see whether I was thinking at all. So introverts are, again, much more interested in this inner world of ideas and impressions. They tend to have a depth of interest. When you think of a scientist and a researcher who go very deeply into a subject, that's the kind of person you would see as an introvert. For me, this is even carried into hobbies and things like that. I do model railroading. Now, for many people, that would mean you have a circle of track around your Christmas tree. For me, as an introvert with a depth of interest, no, I'm modeling 1957 in Chicago around Dearborn Station, and I want to try to replicate the traffic patterns and have the right equipment, and it goes really, really deep. It's not just, hey, I like trains, so I'm going to do this. Maybe a bit obsessive, it sounds like it as I describe it. Introverts are also often interested in thoughts and concepts, having big discussions about big ideas and what those could mean for things, and maybe even for the future. We tend to be inwardly directed, again, focused on maybe having a very strong narrative going on in our heads, but we don't necessarily say that out loud, and people don't necessarily know that. And again, the key differentiator is that introverts re-energize by recharging. Now with extroverts, we talked about this need to be around large groups of people or groups of people and drawing energy from that. For an introvert, being at a party around a large group of noisy people can be absolutely draining, and we do not gain energy, we lose energy from that. So for us to re-energize as an introvert, we need that time alone. Maybe we're binging through Netflix, or we're just home reading a novel, or just in a quiet place where we can kind of regather our thoughts. But probably one of the key differentiators is this idea of how do you re-energize? And we often have questions where people will identify themselves maybe as what they call an ambivert. They can't decide if they're an introvert or an extrovert because they're very functional when they're around people. They're comfortable with it. But the question I always have for them is how do you re-energize? What do you need to do? Do you need to retire and kind of go into a secluded place? If that's the case, they're probably really introverts. And so I'm going to ask the question again. Now that we've gone through my description of what an introvert or an extrovert is, has your answer changed? Do you still consider yourself to be an introvert or an extrovert? I'll take a little bit of time for the poll questions to finish here. So I think our numbers are actually looking very, very similar. We've got a few more seconds to submit responses, and we'll, see if anything different comes in. But most of you seem pretty sure of, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And of course, I don't remember what the exact numbers were on the first poll question, but it does look about the same. Or maybe we've shifted one more into the confused, not sure column. So, it's interesting, when you go through the descriptions. So let's talk a little bit about introverted strengths. Now, we have 3 characters displayed on the screen here. One of them is Albert Einstein, obviously. The other one is, I'm going to mess up the spelling. Woz, because I can't remember how to pronounce his name right now in the presentation. Wozniak. And the third picture is a picture of Sherlock Holmes, who obviously isn't a real true character, but, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, what's interesting is when you start thinking about their strengths, Einstein, very obviously absolute genius, but able to do in-depth research and go after the root of problems and come up with brand new ideas entirely. Wozniak, not Steve Jobs, not the public face of the company, but without him, Apple wouldn't have gotten anywhere. He was kind of the brilliant person behind actually designing how things worked. And of course, with Sherlock Holmes, you've got the idea of somebody who's able to be very perceptive, but also to dig into things and figure out what these little different variations are and how that could lead to solving a crime. So these are strengths, again, for an introvert. Now, one of the big questions that comes up is, are we born introverts, or are we become introverts or extroverts through nurture? And it's still an open question in many ways. But so I've got the first picture on here, which has to be confusing to everybody because meerkats, how could they be introverts or extroverts? So a lot of the materials I'm sharing now were initially developed by Susan Cain, and we'll reference her book later on, but she has a section where she interviewed somebody who studies animal habits and what they do. And what they found is when they look at groups of animals, they can kind of identify introverts within the group and extroverts within the group. And yeah, I know it's a bit of a stretch because, no, they're not taking some kind of test to figure that out. But what they found, and I've got meerkats up here because, one, I like meerkats, but two, I think they exhibit some of these characteristics. Introverts tend to be cautious. With the picture of the meerkats, you have them standing up, kind of looking around, trying to see what's going on. With the studies that Kane cited, they looked at antelope around the watering hole. And what they found was over a period of years, you know, the watering holes, they wouldn't stay constant. You'd have years of drought. You'd have years where there were plenty of water. And you could kind of divide the antelopes into two groups. You had the kind of extroverted group who were just going up to the watering hole, period, drink the water. And then you'd have a more cautious group in the background who they would call the introverted group. Sometimes the extroverted antelopes would go up there and they get attacked and killed by the lion. The introverted ones were in the background. They saw things were going on. They might try to warn the herd, but they didn't necessarily get to the water supply. So what they found was in this group dynamic that they really needed both introverts and extroverts, because the extroverts would be the risk takers. They were willing to go up and get that water, no matter what the risk was, while the introverts would hang back and they saw danger and they would be able to tell the herd that there was danger and react appropriately. So that would be a nature type thing, obviously, because there's not any real nurture going on. So with babies, there was another really, really interesting study, and the results are almost counterintuitive. But they did I guess they call it a longitudinal study, where they did a long-term study over about 20, 25 years. So they studied a group of babies and then saw, as they were 20, 25 or so, where did they come out when they took these kind of standard personality type tests. So what they did with the babies is that they put them in different types of environments. And they found that a group of babies, when they were exposed to really high stimulation, lots of sounds, some of the babies had absolutely no problem with it. They were absolutely fine. They went along with it, no big issues. Other babies reacted really, really strongly. Now, what was interesting about this is that when I read about this, my assumption is that the babies who kind of were quiet and just went along with it were the ones who turned out to be introverts. But what they found was it was the babies who reacted very, very strongly to that outside stimulation who were the ones that it later tracked as being introverts. So part of what the idea around here is that they develop these coping skills where they can kind of exclude what's going on in the environment around them. And kind of, again, if they don't exclude it, they're overreacting to it. So it was just interesting because to me it was very counterintuitive. And the next picture we have is somebody is a library lover. Now, classic idea of introverts, people who are maybe bookish and sit and read a lot and don't get out and interact with people. There's probably some truth to that. But again, the idea around this comes up, was this a nurture thing? Were these children born as people who loved books, or was this something where they were exposed to books as they were growing up and then they really, really enjoyed being able to immerse themselves in a story and that story could become real to them as they were doing it? I think we have a poll question.
Yep. But, you know, before we do the poll, can we actually have a question from a participant. Can an introvert learn or gradually change to become an extrovert?
You know, it's an interesting question, mainly because I think we see introvert and extrovert as two poles where everybody's clustered around one or clustered around the other. I think it's really more of a continuum or a scale. And when you start looking into some of the personality tests that are available online, and our temperament tests, I've got some of those links later on, you'll find that they'll give you a percentage of introversion or a percentage of extroversion. I score very highly on the introverted side. I know that has slid more and more to the extrovert side as I've interacted with people more and more. So I would say, yes, it can change. I think fundamentally it's going to still come down to what do you need to do to recharge. But I know plenty of introverts who you would never guess they were introverts, and I have people at conferences who know I identify as an introvert, and they say there's absolutely no way. There is no way you're an introvert because you're so outgoing at the conference. But the way that works for me is I kind of feel like I'm among my tribe. I know a lot of the people at the conference. We all have maybe some of the same thoughts, same things that we're working on, and I have a comfort level with them, so I tend to be more extroverted. Probably to the point that my wife has told me she would be much happier if I acted like conference Ben when I was at home rather than how I am at the conference, because she's at the conferences with me sometimes. And it's like, at the conference, I'm go, go, go. Yeah, I'll go do the karaoke. Let's go out and do this. Let's do this event. And when I get home, now I'm going to stay home. I just want to sit here. I don't want to go out. I've been at work all week. So a very long-winded answer, but yes, I do think it shifts over time.
Great.
So our question was, what do you think has been more formative to your personality, nature or nurture? Yeah, we just have just a little bit longer on the poll. It looks like right now we're evenly divided, so let's see if we can sway it one way or the other. It doesn't look like it. So for purposes of this group, and I think purposes of the research in general, the jury's really out. Is it nature or nurture? No, it's probably actually both. So we all recognize impacts. I think my next slide may refer to this a little bit, but I basically grew up in the middle of an orange grove, in a house, yes, in the middle of an orange grove in Florida, but I didn't have any neighbors probably within half a mile or so, and the ones that were that close were the guy got married at 16 sort of thing, not necessarily the people I'd want to hang out with. So I spent a lot of time reading. And still read quite a bit, not as much as I did then, but I think by the time I was in second grade, I'd pretty much read through most of the books in the house that seemed suitable, and I think my mom, out of exasperation, gave me the Odyssey to read through, and I read it in about 3 or 4 days. Now, didn't have any of the pronunciations correct. I knew it was Penelope, and who knows what I was doing with the other names in there. But I do think that environment that I grew up in had a lot to do in terms of my introversion versus extroversion. We have all the results in. Yeah. Okay. So again, we're really split on this.
Yeah, pretty closely split. Yeah.
So let's talk about Western society. Now, I would argue that it's an extroverted world, and I suspect that most of you would argue the same. Now, it's interesting because our society did not always used to be that way. Back in the 19th century, we were still pretty much an agrarian society. People lived in small towns, they lived in farms. They grew up and worked around the same people for their entire lives. And there's interesting things about it because there are books on how to succeed. They didn't really even call them how to succeed at that point in time, but kind of what do you need to do. And they were all books about moral fortitude and the idea of having strong characters and having depth of thought. As our society changed and more people moved to the cities, people found that they were working around strangers. They, had not known these people growing up, and all of a sudden you get into this idea of how do I interact with people that I don't know, that I'm not comfortable with. And around this time is when Dale Carnegie came out with his How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book's been around for many, many years at this point. But the emphasis changed more from the moral character idea of what people should be to how people, to put it kind of shallowly, is how people could become popular. How can they win friends? How can they influence people? And the self-help books that come out around this time are all around this type of thing. Even the advertising. I don't have a picture of it, but there's a Lux soap ad, and it talks about how using Lux soap can make you more popular, around all of these other people. I assume it says more sparkling and all sorts of things like that too. But all of the advertising, everything was shifting because our society, we were living in a different way than we had lived for centuries before. Now, the other pictures up here, the one on the right is a picture of Tony Robbins, and he is like a 6'7" motivational speaker. And he has these enormous tent rallies and, donor clubs that sit within the first row and pay however many tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do that. But it's like one giant pep rally sort of thing, and it's the kind of thing that if I went to that as an introvert, I would probably be running screaming from the arena or the tent, as we got into it at all. One other interesting thing, which, is a kind of maybe it worked this way, maybe it didn't, was a picture of the bull on Wall Street. So some of the studies around the stock market crash of 2008, take a look at the personalities of the traders involved, what kind of risks they were taking. And we had been in a situation that for many years, pretty much every trader, every risk they took paid off. And for the conservative traders, they were not seeing the same return on investment or the same growth that the other traders were seeing. And part of the thought around here is that what happened is that as the traders who were doing the more risky trades, or what we would probably consider to be extroverted, became more popular, they gained more and more influence. And the more conservative traders, because they were not doing as well, either lost influence or actually may have lost their jobs. So part of the study around this, and I'm kind of mixed about whether it's totally valid or not, but part of the study around here is that you had a culture where risk-taking was rewarded and expected. And as that happened, greater and greater risks were taken, and things obviously became more risky because of what happened back in 2008. So it's an interesting way to look at it, but in general, Western society, I would argue very strongly, it's an extroverted world. We see leaders as these charismatic individuals who are out in front of their companies and who are basically they're rock stars. They're the people that everybody follows, everybody has a lot of acclaim about. Now, the slide I've put up now is really about what makes a good leader. And for years, for me, it was that assumption that it had to be this charismatic individual who was very quick to think on their feet, who could rally the troops, who could lead the charge into things, be very hard-nosed as needed, and just be that flamboyant, charismatic individual. But when you start looking at leadership, it gets a little bit deeper than this. Gandhi, very much an introvert. He made huge changes to society through the passive resistance in British colonialism. He wasn't out there yelling and screaming and stirring up, lots of angst and anger against Britain in India. Abraham Lincoln, very much an introvert, but a very strategic thinker. But he was also known as somebody who was kind of halting of speech and was not necessarily what we would expect in terms of being presidential in that sense. But as an introvert, again, he was a very strategic thinker, and he, basically held the country together during the Civil War. I don't have the picture up here, but in terms of the civil rights movement, you had Martin Luther King, you had Jesse Jackson, you had your very public faces in the civil rights movement, but then you had Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks was not the person who was out there stirring up, leading, basically being very public and leading, but because of the fact that she was willing to sit on that bus and refused to get off of that bus, and the fact that she was not a loud vocal leader, helped make what she did be even more important, because it was unexpected. It was a passive type of resistance in a sense, but it was also not this extrovert out there talking to everyone about what they needed to be doing. So I think I have a poll question. I hope. Yeah. Yep. So based on this little bit of discussion, I'm just curious about whether you consider yourselves to be leaders or not. And we've got the D answer, I'm not interested in being a leader, which is absolutely fine. But interested in seeing what do you all think? Do you consider yourselves to be leaders? We got just a few more seconds left, and we'll see where the results come in. I think we had at least one brave soul who said, I'm not interested in being a leader, which, good for you.
Not
absolutely.
Everybody can be, right?
As we roll up the questions, and let's see where we came out on this. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, interesting. More people saying yes, quite a few saying not sure. And, you know, so many of you are interested in being a leader. But I guess what I would say is whether you regard yourself as a leader or not, you can still be an influencer wherever you are, whether you're in this formal leadership position or not. And honestly, some of you may be in jobs or places where you don't have that opportunity, and you may need to seek out other avenues, and I'll talk about that. So my leadership journey.
We do have a question.
Oh, yes.
And a comment. Because you just talked about jobs and leadership. So the comment that was made, which I think is very relevant, is John wrote that I'm extremely introverted and I work in advertising for years. He said he learned how to be extroverted when he needed to give presentations or teach classes. And then Thomas is curious about, do religious backgrounds determine introvert or extrovert tendencies?
Now that's a hard Thomas, that's a hard question. And I'm not sure how nuanced the question is. I would say that the religious traditions that I'm familiar with, which are primarily on the Christian side, there are certainly denominations where there's much more of a focus on what is happening internally with you, and in that sense could be more directed, more introvert directed, especially if you're talking about meditation and contemplation and things like that. But there are other Christian religious organizations or sects or denominations where the emphasis is much more on extroversion. And even if you're going into evangelicalism in terms of sharing your faith and having this vocal outreach to people. So I think it really can make a difference. Obviously, it still ties back to this nurture versus nature sort of thing, but you could argue that people of a certain nature are attracted to certain things as well. But I do think you see the characteristics. And broadening that a little bit, and I do not have the info in the slide, there was an artist, Japanese artist who grew up in Japan, and she put together a set of infographics around East versus West, and taking it up to that cultural level in terms of entire countries, what happens is when she did these infographics showing the difference between the countries in terms of something like problem solving, in Germany it was very much a heads-on, straight, as I would describe it, straight into the wall approach until you're either bloodied enough or you break through the wall. In the Asian cultures, they wouldn't try to go through the wall. They would work their way around the wall and get the same, get to the results they needed. So even on a larger country or ethnic group basis, I think that you will see some more tendencies towards introversion or extroversion. And I think the argument is that Eastern cultures, Asian cultures, are more introvert focused than Western cultures are.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
So my leadership journey. Not sure what slides I've left in here because I had enough pictures of myself growing up that got embarrassing, so I pulled most of them. But this is the house I grew up in. middle of an orange grove in Florida. At this point in time, it's actually become a museum, one of the few vernacular houses built in Florida from the late 19th century that still survives. But as you can see, there's no neighborhood here. There's no sidewalks, there are no basketball hoops, there are no groups of kids that I hung around with. So I very much, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in this kind of isolated circumstance. My sister and I are both voracious readers. We're both pretty introverted, and our mom was definitely extroverted, and we didn't want to go in and ask questions in a store or anything else. We'd always tried to outwait her until she would go in and do it. But in terms of where that reflects with the leadership journey, I, for many, many years, assumed as an introvert that I had no ability to be an extrovert, to be a leader whatsoever, because my picture of a leader was not, to me, I'd say it was not right at this point in time, but it was always about that charismatic leader who was out in front of everybody, and I knew that's not who I was. So part of my leadership journey, which was, I was interested in, I had good ideas, I knew that, and I was interested in leading in various areas, but I never felt confident in that. And some ways I find it embarrassing in some ways, but part of what helped me in terms of a leadership journey, and we'll talk about some other pieces of it, but I didn't really realize that I could be a leader until I took one of these temperament tests that said, oh, you're an INTJ, and I won't go into what that is in this presentation, but it says, oh, INTJs can be good leaders. It says they're reluctant to lead, which I certainly had that, but they can also be good leaders. And for me, just reading and understanding that these temperament pieces for me and this personality type and the strengths and weaknesses helped me understand what I needed to do. Now, my leadership journey in general, I work at RIT. I have not had a lot of opportunities to engage in leadership of any kind at RIT because my position is more of not exactly a technical position, but it's also not a management position. But what I did was get involved with a nonprofit organization. And the nonprofit organization I'm involved with is the Society for Technical Communication. And it's an international organization that has local geographic chapters. And there is a chapter in Rochester. And from my leadership journey, I started doing small things. Now, I didn't volunteer to do anything, but I had somebody ask, can you be the program manager? Can you set up, learning events for us? You're at RIT, you must be able to find speakers for us. So I agreed to do that and, did that for a couple of years, and then they were kind of going through the nomination slate, and they were asking me, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm willing to do absolutely anything except for vice president or president because I don't want to be in those areas. So they said fine, at least I think they said fine, but when the ballot came out, I was listed on there as a vice president candidate. So I had not volunteered for it, but I also didn't back out when they put me on the ballot for that. I ran for it. We had co-vice presidents, so that made it easier. But what I found is in my involvement in this nonprofit organization is that I started building on small successes. And more importantly, and we'll talk about what drives me, but I saw where I could make a difference, and I wanted to be able to make that difference. So my leadership was going up through that nonprofit to the point I was elected as a director at the international level and may very well be on the ballot for the president this year. So May 2017, I was at our International Summit Conference, and lo and behold, I received the President's Award from the society. I was absolutely stunned, which is the picture of me as I'm finding out that I'm getting this award. But I didn't think that I had done anything big. I've been involved in a lot of small things, but they had gone well. And as an introvert not seeking the spotlight, the big thing for me was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're talking about me. Enough that I blanked out totally within a sentence or two once I figured out they're talking about me. And my main thought was don't fall. As I'm going up onto the stage, don't trip. So message here isn't that I've reached this pinnacle of anything, but it's really that even as an introvert, you can do a lot of small things that can make a big difference, and you may or may not receive recognition for it, but it was a pretty cool thing for me. So let's talk about what drives me. And again, this gets into the about me piece of it, but this is the introversion thing and who I am. So I am very good at seeing gaps. Now, that can be frustrating for people when they've come up with ideas of things to do, and I can see all of the problems with it and why things won't work. But I'm really good at seeing gaps, and I'm good at figuring out how to address the gaps. The other thing that drives me is I really want to make a difference. I want whatever I'm engaged in, that's probably a bit broad, but what I'm engaged in to be meaningful. And if I can make a difference, I will step into that gap to try to make that difference. Now, that can be problematic in some ways because it can really take your time. But if I see something and I think I can make a difference, I really want to be involved in it. I also believe strongly in practicing servant leadership, and what that means for me is that I honestly don't care about the accolades or the recognition or being known as the leader of an organization, but it's very important to me that as I enroll people in a vision and have an idea of where we need to go, I want the people that are on the team to be successful, and I will do everything I can to help the other people on the team. And if they get the credit, that's absolutely fine. I just want to get to, help them get to that goal and do as much as they want to do. And it's also important for me to pursue excellence. I don't want to do a crappy job at anything. If I'm going to be involved in something, I want to do the very best I can. And I'm competitive. So if there's a competition or something else, I really, really want to win, whether it's me or as the group. And not sure that's a good thing, but that's one of the things that drives me. So what has helped me in terms of understanding how to be a leader as an introvert is I've had these small successes. I didn't start out with some big project or big leadership opportunity. I started with small things. As I had successes, I could build on those successes. Understanding introversion, understanding my specific personality type made an enormous difference. Again, it bothers me that I almost have to read somewhere else and that I can be a leader to understand that I can be a leader, but I see I have the same problem when I feel like I need a certification to prove that I can do something regardless of whether other people think I need it or not. And another interesting part of that is I sometimes feel like I identify with anybody more of anything, the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. Because the Scarecrow was really brilliant, but he needed that piece of paper, he needed that diploma to be able to believe himself that he could do it. But for me, this really comes to understanding introversion, understanding what that means. Also understanding how I communicate best. I am not at my best if I have to answer questions, spur of the moment in a meeting on my, think on my feet sort of thing. I'm better at it now because I've had to do it enough times, but understanding that for me in terms of if my manager or somebody wants the best possible idea that I have to offer, I need time to step back and reflect on that and come up with that strategy. I also communicate much better, at least I feel I communicate better in writing than I do verbally. So understanding that's the case, I want to make sure I get things in a nice email or memo. And again, I took the Myers-Briggs temperament inventory assessment to get some idea of where I came out. And again, that's beyond the scope of this program, but I'm happy to chat with anybody about that in the future.
Before you move on to the next section, we do have two folks have written in, and they have a similar situation, although they're very different individuals from based on what they do. One is an engineer and one is an artist. The engineer writes that there's a love there for developing concepts and ideas, but there's a difficulty conveying those ideas and selling them into the company the engineer works for. The artist believes that her art reflects her introvert nature, but like the engineer, she's got difficulty meeting the public and trying to sell her work. So what have you found has been helpful to you to be able to kind of overcome those really inherent obstacles?
Okay, so we've got, and these are different situations. I think for the engineering question and selling things to the company and getting them to buy into what your vision is, I think part of it is finding how you can best articulate that vision and communicate it. Maybe you can write it up. Maybe you probably want to, depending on how you feel about your communication abilities and your writing skills, you may want to have somebody who's a colleague look at it first to make sure that you're actually communicating what you think you're communicating. I work with technical people all the time, and there are many times they really believe they're very clear about what they want to communicate and what they think somebody should do. But what happens is that they make assumptions about what other people are going to read into what they're saying, and sometimes you just need to be more explicit. In terms of the artist question, there are a couple of things that strike me with that. One, you have passion for doing the art, or you wouldn't be doing the art. So part of what I think makes the work attractive and would make you attractive is finding how can you communicate that passion. Maybe you write up things describing the artwork that really share your vision with it. The marketing piece, I would suggest finding somebody who's comfortable doing the marketing, but you've also got the option of marketing online where you have time to figure out what it is that you want to say, and you can make sure you've got that message very clear. And the one thing the internet has done for us, it's for introverts especially, it has given us new methods, new modes of communication where we don't have to be in that position where we're standing in front of somebody or even on the phone with them and we're really, really nervous about things. So it's very surface response, but those are my initial ideas around it.
Thank you.
So, one more slide. So where I'm still weak, I do not like conflict. I will do almost everything to avoid conflict. And that can be problematic in the workplace because there's sometimes that you really cannot avoid conflict. One of the things I've done to address that is I've taken crucial conversations and I have more of an understanding how to come into things objectively, but that's an area I'm definitely still weak. I'm often reticent when I should speak up. I had a class in my doctoral program. I was working on a history doctorate at the University of Rochester. Did not finish, but I took an American history class, which I had very little background in, and I don't think I opened my mouth the entire semester. And I still passed it somehow. But there are often times where I'll think of something and maybe it's not an opportune time to say it. But I've learned more about that. Sometimes you really need to speak up if you know something. But there are ways to do it. I mean, you can communicate in writing, you can pull the speaker aside later, that sort of thing. I tend to overanalyze before starting, moving in a direction. Now, I am far better about that than I used to be. I've become very much of the mindset that my car needs to be moving. I can steer all I want, but if the car's parked, it's not going anywhere. So one of the things I've learned about my personality type is I'm very good at contingency planning. And I can have my plan A and be moving in a direction. If A doesn't work, I'll shift to B, I'll shift to C, but anything to kind of keep things moving. But as a weakness, I still tend to overanalyze. And I'm competitive. I've got that identified as something that drives me, but I also recognize it can definitely be a weakness because not everything is about competition. There are things that should be win-wins for people. In terms of day-to-day strategies that you can apply, you do need to network. You don't avoid events. One thing that a colleague of mine mentioned years ago when we first started talking about introversion was that going to a networking event is not about collecting as many business cards and meeting as many people as you can and having surface-level conversations. Surface-level conversations are really painful for most introverts. But if you can connect with one or two people, and maybe you can connect, and I know this idea of approaching the people is not really comfortable either, But if you go to a networking event and you have people who are in the center of the room and it's loud, that's not a place where we're comfortable. If you check the sides of the room, you're going to figure out who the other introverts are there, because there will be the ones off to the side. There may be conversations or 2 or 3 people. And you may find that you build 1 or 2 really good connections and you have deep conversation with them. So look at networking as an opportunity, I think, to build those conversations, build those connections around shared goals rather than a cattle call type thing where you're trying to meet everybody. It's not the right illusion, but you know where I'm going with it. Understand how you work best. Understand that you need to maybe pull back and think about things before you provide a solution. I do a workshop around this, and one of my workshop participants contacted me afterwards, and he said that what he had done was his manager had basically said that his meeting behavior or his preparation for meeting was just not where it should be, and it was area for improvement. He talked to the manager and actually meets with the manager before the meetings to get a preview of what the meetings are going to be about. And that gives him time to think through things, and he's able to participate more and more coherently, I think, in the meetings. Let others know how you process. Let people know you're an introvert. They probably know already. But the key thing, again, is let them know that you need time. If they want a quick answer, well, that's fine. Anybody can give a quick answer, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the right answer. If they want the best answer, maybe you need time to work through that and process it. Leverage social media. Ideally, it's the introvert's playground because we can communicate in depth about anything because we have time to think about what we post. Now, granted, looking at Facebook over the last couple of years, it's a question how many people think about anything they post. But this gives us time to really consider things and make sure we've got things worded the way we want to. And learn to communicate in multiple formats, whichever ways work for you. And most importantly, make sure you take the time to recharge. So where do you go from here? Get to know yourself. Take a personality assessment. You might take DISC. That's available in a lot of corporations. It's not my favorite because I think it gets a bit more complicated, but take a look at the Myers-Briggs or Keirsey, which I'll have more information about here. As much as possible, control your environment. Many of you are in open offices probably at this point, which is difficult for everybody, but really, really difficult for introverts. If they'll allow you to use a headset, noise dampening headset, something like that, do so. If you can mark off your space, you know, potted plants, something to mark off your space, that can help too in terms of controlling your environment. Learn to communicate your value. This is really, really hard for me and for introverts in general because at least I've always assumed that good work is going to be noticed. That isn't necessarily also the case, and I think there are studies that show that extroverts are more likely to be promoted easily than introverts, and it's because we don't communicate our value. One friend of mine actually does like every 2-week summary of everything he's been working on and the things that he's done and gives that to his manager so that he has a record and knows he's actually working on things because he's not verbal about the things he does. And again, leverage your introversion. In terms of resources, Susan Cain's Quiet book, if you've not read it, I recommend, if nothing else, read that. Lisa Petrilli has an Introvert's Guide to Success in Business and Leadership. It's a Kindle book. She is a C-level executive, and she's done it as an introvert. David Keirsey, Please Understand Me Too. It's about temperament, and I've found that probably to be the most insightful explanation of things personality and temperament-wise that has helped me the most. Look for a Young Typology test. There's a test at humanmetrics.com you can take, and it will give you ideas on your strengths and weaknesses and what works best for you. In terms of things that I've written, which you are, 3 of these are easily accessible. EDUCAUSE review, I wrote basically an article based on this presentation and other thoughts about lessons learned on an introvert's journey to leadership. You can access that online. There's a content podcast where I talked for an hour and 20 minutes about being an introverted leader, which kind of shocked both me and the host. But that's available, and there's this Thought Leader Thursday web series where I was a guest speaker and interviewed summer ago. All of these resources are available from my website, benwoelk.com, so you can find them there. The Intercom picture that's up here, that magazine's behind a paywall. What was really cool about that is that when I first did this presentation in Anaheim back in May of 2016, I came out of the conference realizing what a difference this had made for so many people, and asked the editor, can I do an article on introversion or introverted leadership? And she said, well, would you like to do an entire issue? So I was able to guest edit the issue, find a whole set of writers, which is a fascinating story in and of itself. But we were able to do a whole issue on personality, temperament, and technical communication, which was great. In terms of other things that I'm doing in addition to my day job, I have an Introverted Leadership Slack community. Now, Slack provides an online workspace. You are welcome to join me in that. Drop me a note, and my contact information is in this thing, but it's also, if you go to benwoelk.com, you'll find it. We have about 150 people who've signed up on this, and it gives us a chance to chat about things of interest to us as introverts and as leaders. I also offer virtual coaching and mentoring services. I have a number of clients now that I'm working with. I have a couple of workshops that I've put together. I have the Revive and Thrive temperament-based strategies for the workplace, which at this point in time is a half-day workshop and could be a full-day workshop, and I'm happy to come into a company to do that. And Bulletproofing Your Career Online, which was developed with a colleague, Hannah Morgan, who I believe is presenting later this fall for me, RIT. But that's one that we do together, and she talks about the branding piece of it. I talk about the internet safety piece of it in terms of making sure your career is okay. I'm happy to do keynotes and presentations, and again, all my information is at benwoelk.com. And here's my connection information, and do we have any other questions?
We have a couple, and we're quickly out of time, but let's try to sneak these in. Neil wants to know, are there any hints or suggestions for being on a job interview as an introvert where answers are expected quickly?
I would say the biggest thing is going into an interview is make sure you've done a lot of research on the company and the position, and think ahead of time about what questions may come up and what things that you want to talk about. But the key with being an introvert and going into a conversation is feeling competent in knowing enough information to talk. So I would research as much as you can find out about the position you're interviewing for. And it's still going to be discomfort, yes, because it's an on-the-spot question. Okay,
here's an interesting one. I think it comes from Thomas. Should we be designing our foreign relations policy based on our impression of a society or country as being introverted or extroverted in nature? Whoa, that's a big one.
That's a big mega question. I suspect it's too general in terms of making policy decisions, but I do think, it makes a difference. Business is conducted very differently in some countries than other countries. And I think in terms of understanding cultural mindsets, I think it absolutely makes a difference. In terms of how determinative it is, that's another question entirely. But knowing that in an Asian culture, there is deference given to leaders and such. In Western culture, it's all kind of proved that you deserve this leadership opportunity. I think it should. I guess the easy answer is it should inform our policy decisions, which doesn't give you any real answer at all, but I think it's important.
All right, it's just after the hour, so if there are any more questions, please, you can email them directly to Ben, or you can email them to ritalum@rit.edu, or tweet them to @RIT_alumni. with the hashtag #MeRIT. I apologize that we've gone a little over. We will get to your questions offline if you do get them to us. Thanks to you all for joining. Many thanks to Ben for being our wonderful presenter today. Ben will be back in February, but it's a few months off, so we'll send you some email what to expect then from Ben. But join us next week, actually, for 5 steps to getting your products on store shelves with Chef A.J. Richards. Next Wednesday, November 15th, same time, same WebEx channel. So thank you again for joining us. Please exit this webinar by closing your WebEx window. Please do let us know what you thought of the webinar by taking a very brief and optional survey, which will pop up when you exit. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again, folks.